Now we get to the most interesting verse of the bunch, in many respects. Verse 25. Gabriel says to Daniel, know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem, bear in mind, Daniel's in slavery in Babylon. Jerusalem, 200 miles to the west, is in rubble. It's been there for 70 years. He says, know that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem unto the Mashiach Nagid, the Messiah, the King, shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. The street shall be built again, and the wall, even in troubled times. Unto the Messiah, Mashiach Nagid. The word Nagid is first used of Saul. It means king. It's translated prince in your King James, but that's misleading because most of us think of a prince as a king in waiting or something. The term there is used as a king. Mashiach Nagid. Shall be 7 and 62. In other words, 7 plus 62. There's all kinds of speculations as to why is it 7 and 62. I'll spare that for now to keep it going because we won't make it if I get in all the side trips here. But notice the scope of this is not the temple. It's the city. If you study Bibles, have footnotes, say there's 4 different decrees that could fit there. Some say 3, there's actually 4. But 3 of the 4 are about the temple, not about the city. There's only one decree that has to do with the city. I'll come back to that in a minute. And here, notice what the Holy Spirit says through Gabriel. The street shall be built again, and the wall, even in troublous times. So the focus of this is the city. Now I want you to notice the from and unto. This is a precise mathematical statement. Gabriel says to Daniel, know therefore understand that from the going forth of the commandment unto the Messiah shall be a period of time. Well, let's take a look at this. From the commandment to restore Jerusalem unto the Mashiach Nagid, it's 69 weeks, 62 plus 7, times 7 to make it a week of years. And we're indebted to the scholarship of Sir Robert Anderson, who was knighted. He's the head of Scotland Yard, and his classic work in 1894 was the first to really unravel this whole thing. But he recognized that God uses in Genesis and in Revelation and all between years of 360 days. And we could spend an hour explaining why, but at this point, let me just stipulate it as a biblical observation. There are all kinds of scientific conjectures about the planet Mars being on a synchronous orbit with the Earth with near pass-bys that caused adjustments in calendars. And there's a whole fascinating background, but we'll leave that for simply. All we need to realize here is that God does choose to use 360-day years. Now, which means that what Gabriel is telling Daniel is that from the commandment to restore and build Jerusalem unto the Messiah the King will be 173,880 days. Well, the first point is, when does this trigger? What triggers this whole thing? It turns out there's one clear decree in Nehemiah chapter 2. There's a decree by Artaxerxes Longimanus that was given on March 14th of 445 BC. And that's well documented in the writings of Sir Robert Anderson. He published a book called The Coming Prince back in 1894. It was a book out of print for many, many years. Today you can get it in any well-stocked Christian bookstore. It's an essential part of your library if you're serious about prophecy. The question is, okay, that's the trigger. But Gabriel says, unto the Messiah the King. And we have a problem here. Several times in the Gospels, they tried to take Jesus and make him a king. And he said, mine hour is not yet come, and he slips away. That happened several times, John 6, several other places. Then one day, something very strange happens. There's one particular day that he not only allows it, he arranges it. He tells a couple of his guys to go to a certain place, give the guy a password, he'll release a donkey, and he rides that donkey from Bethany up over the Mount of Olives going westward, down through the Kidron Valley into Jerusalem. We celebrate that day. We call it Triumphal Entry. So sometimes we call it Palm Sunday. Now, we need to get the picture here. Jerusalem, it's 4 days until Passover. It's one of the 3 days of the year in which every able-bodied Jew that could was supposed to be there. So the place is crowded with tourists. And they've all heard about Lazarus and all this, so they're excited. So as he comes riding, they're excited. And what do? Well, first of all, he arranges this donkey. I want to go back and remind you from last time. Zechariah 9:9, where Zechariah 5 centuries earlier said, rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, thy king cometh unto thee. He is just and having salvation, lowly riding upon an ass, and upon a colt, the foal of an ass. We often quote that because remember that predicts that Jesus is going to ride the donkey. But I want you to notice a key word here. Behold, thy what comes? Thy king. Jesus is riding that donkey, deliberately fulfilling Zechariah 9:9. Now when you get to Luke chapter 19, is one of the several Gospels that record the event. It mentions that the people, as he comes riding, are singing a psalm. They're saying, blessed be the King that cometh in the name of the Lord, peace in heaven and glory in the highest. That's in Luke chapter 19, verse 38. But they're quoting Psalm 118. How many of you have heard the psalm, this is the day which the Lord hath made, we shall rejoice and be glad in it? How many have heard that? Sure, you all have. And we tend to celebrate that verse as applying to any day. This is the day which the Lord hath made. Indeed he has, and I'm not saying that's wrong, but that's not what the psalm is talking about. That psalm is intended to speak of this day. This is the day which the Lord hath made. We shall rejoice and be glad in it. Why? Because blessed be the King that cometh in the name of the Lord. They are declaring him the Messiah. Now, whenever you and I, as Gentile readers, run the risk of missing a point, the Pharisees come to our rescue. Every time you see them upset, that's a flag the Holy Spirit's put there to get your attention. There's a reason they're upset. Now, as he's riding the donkey in, they're singing, they got their palm branches and their coats laying down. It's a big deal. Everybody's joyous. And they're singing Psalm 118. The Pharisees from among the multitude said unto Jesus, Master, rebuke your disciples. They're upset. They're not trying to quiet the crowd. They couldn't do that if they tried. But they certainly figure he doesn't want them doing what they're doing. Why? What are they upset about? The Pharisees believe that he's allowing the crowd to blaspheme because the Pharisees recognize the crowd is declaring him the Mashiach Nagid, the Messiah, the King. This whole situation is one that they assume he certainly doesn't expect to be called the Son of God, the Messiah, and so on and so forth. Master, rebuke your disciples. That's in verse 39. I love the next verse where Jesus so tactfully says to them, Jesus answered and said to them, I tell you that if these should hold their peace, the stones would immediately cry out. That must have shook them up. Whenever we're in Israel, one of the things you'll always do if you go on any tour, you'll end up going to the top of the Mount of Olives because there's a great photo op up there. There's a hotel, the Seven Arches, and your buses will park there, and you can take your pictures of this incredible skyline because it's just across the Kidron Valley. And what you usually do from there, since your next stop is usually Gethsemane, which is the base of the hill in the valley, the buses usually come around there and pick you up there. What you do typically is you'll walk from there just down this road to Gethsemane, where your tour guide will typically have a Bible study there on Gethsemane, and then the buses will take you to your next stop. It's a very typical pattern. It works out pretty comfortably. Whenever our tour is about to get off the bus on the top of Mount of Olives, I say, take all your pictures and so forth. But if you want the best bargain in Israel, I'll tell you what it is. You know the secret to take a small fortune out of Israel is to bring a large fortune in. You know how to do that well. So what you're looking for is to survive this whole thing. One of the things you do is when you're walking down that road to Gethsemane, reach down and pick a couple of stones and put them in your pocket. And when you get back to the United States, or wherever your hometown is, what you do is go to a trophy shop and have them mount that for you on a piece of walnut or whatever, do it yourself with some epoxy, put a little plaque on it if you like, and you put that in your den or in your living room or on your desk at work, and when somebody says, what's that? You say, that's one of the stones that didn't cry out. And you get to explain Daniel 9, Luke 19, right? And they brought it up, right? You see? Anyway, let's talk a little about the chronology of his ministry. Christ's ministry began in the fall of 28 AD. And how do I know that? We know that Tiberius was appointed in 14 AD because Augustus died on August 19th of 14 AD. And Luke 3, verse 1 says it was in the 15th year of Tiberius, which means it's in the 15th year. That means it's 14 years into it. You with me? 14 years behind it. So you take 14 when he was appointed, and 14 years is 28. So when 28 years is behind him, he's in the 15th year. You get the picture? Many people add that wrong. It's within the 15th year that Luke's talking about. So it's The point is his ministry began in the fall of 28 AD. Now the fourth Passover, which is the Passover in which he's crucified, turns out to be April 6th of 32 AD. And that's, again, Sir Robert Anderson supplies us with all the background. You will find some books that have a different chronology because they're trying to protect or defend a Friday crucifixion. We believe from Matthew 28 in the Greek, and from about 3 or 4 different points of view, that Jesus could not have been crucified on a Friday. It would have to be prior to that, because there were 2 Sabbaths that week. Not the Shabbat on Saturday, and also the Feast of Unleavened Bread. When the Sabbaths, plural, were passed, the women come to the tomb. So we know it couldn't be Friday. Anyway, I won't get into all that here. But the reason you find some of these other chronologies is because they're trying to protect a Friday crucifixion. And we'll leave that where it is. The point is, the triumphal entry was April 6th of 32 AD. Here's what's interesting. If you go from 445, March 14th to 445 BC to April 6th, 32 AD, 445 to 32 AD is 173,740 days. Remember, there's no year zero. From March 14th to April 6th, another 24 days, and the leap years, if you go through all that rigmarole, is 116 days. When you add that up, between the degree of Artaxerxes Longimanus in March 14th to 445 BC, and the triumphal entry in which Jesus deliberately presents himself as the king, the Messiah, the Mashiach Nagid, is 173,880 days. What was Gabriel's margin for error? 0. Right on the money. And incidentally, the Septuagint translation, set aside who wrote Daniel, set aside all those things. It was in black and white as part of the Septuagint translation 3 centuries earlier. Remarkable, astonishing. The more you analyze this, you come to the inescapable conclusion that Jesus Christ was the fulfillment of the Old Testament prophecies. He presented himself on schedule as the Messiah, the King to Jerusalem. You say, gee, wasn't his death a tragedy? No, it was an achievement. That's what he was born for. That's what he came to do, to die for you and I.